Hi, I'm Ali Zendrian, Editor-in-Chief of Brand News, and this is the Financial Services News You Might Have Missed podcast. This is where I uncover news gems that might not have gotten their full chance to sparkle, and I dust them off a little bit. I'm joined by my trusted co-host and personal financial advisor, Brandon Galisi of Galisi Financial. Brandon, how's everything going?
Things are good. It's another beautiful sunny day in Southern California. I think we're going to hit around 75 today, so we'll gladly take that. And I had some success last week with boosting a post and connected with a potential client that was a really good conversation. So I'm just kind of jazzed about that. And it's like, wow, imagine that marketing actually works, but it's just kind of cool when you get to experience it. So what about you? What have you been up to?
I gotta say, I love the fact that you can say things like marketing works. And it's like, yeah, it's sad that you have to say things like that, but at least the proof is in the pudding. It's true. And you are not a marketer yourself, although you do a very good job of it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, my week's been good. For those not aware, I am also adjunct teaching this semester. It's been nice seeing the students participate a little bit more and like get in the groove of class. I'll take it.
Yeah, and teaching NPR too.
Oh, yes. Introduction to public relations. So I am qualified to teach.
Yeah, right up your alley, pun intended.
Thank you. So our first piece of news this week is from CIC Partners. They're a middle market private equity firm which announced the realization of its investment in the American College of Education. This partnership started in 2020, and since then, the ACE has solidified its position as a leader in affordable, high-quality, and online education, according to the press release. The ACE has more than 52,000 alumni over its 20 years of service. So you might be asking yourselves, what does this have to do with financial services? And you might be right. So what I thought was interesting here, other than giving applause to the American College of Education for doing a good job, was that I don't often see press releases announcing that a firm has exited an investment. So I thought that was really interesting and the fruits of their investment. So good job to CIC for putting that out there. But Brandon, any thoughts from you on this one?
Yeah, it sounds like they've done a great job over the last several years. I mean, 52,000 people, that's a lot of folks going through the program. And it sounds like it's more online in nature as well. And I think that's a huge benefit for the flexibility and just the world that we live in now can be a huge benefit, of course, instead of having to be only locked in. And I know other institutions do this too, but instead of only having to go in person, it's nice to be able to learn at your own pace, if you will, or at least have guided learning from the comfort of your home, coffee shop, etc. So yeah, pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. So moving on to our next bit of news, this is from Macrobond, which launched what it's called a new standard for interactive financial research called Macrobond Amplify. The press release noted that this research distribution tool geared toward economists and analysts will deliver interactive content to their consumers at scale. Further, the press release said, quote unquote, analysts and economists face growing pressure to ensure their work reaches the right audiences, shows transparency, and demonstrates the rigor behind their thinking. What caught my eye here was the interactive content. I know that we've discussed before on the podcast that you read a research paper and it's like, well, yeah, there was a table and we're calling that interactive. But I mean, it didn't really move the needle for me. Seeing content that is hopefully truly interactive and you can really engage with and learn better from, I think will be great. But those were my fancy feelings. I would love to get yours.
And we've talked about content a lot on the show previously, but I think the fact that content is moving so much faster and the tech and all of the tools around that, where even individual creators can create and produce very high quality pieces of video or writing and other types of content like that. I think it's cool that we're seeing it come into a more, I guess we'll call it a professional format here, where it's not just boring, static information, but what are we truly trying to relay? And I think that's anytime that we're showing a piece of information, whether that be in presentation, even if it's just verbal, one-on-one, or obviously this is medium, of course, is podcasting that we're sharing out. How do we make it where, yes, the information and the content itself has to be good, but also how is it engaging? Because theoretically, you could have the most accurate, helpful piece of content, but if it's not crafted in a way or positioned in a way that's engaging, people just aren't going to read it. And if they don't read it, they're not taking action. They're not learning from it. So I think it's cool that we're seeing this come into the professional space on how do we make this very good information engaging and more interactive.
Well, it made me think, so this is for economists and analysts, and granted that's not technically you, but do you feel like you would either engage differently or learn differently if something were interactive that came to you versus, I'm sure a lot of times you're getting information and it's news article that's got no video or other pieces of research relatively dry. Do you feel like that would make a difference for you as a
So I'm
professional?
a, so I'm a bit of a geek, and I love even the stuff that I completely acknowledge would be dry. For example, like we'll just take taxes. A lot of advisors and many advisors don't do tax planning, don't like taxes, stay away from it. I love it. I find it incredibly fascinating. So I can read books on growing a tax practice. I could read books on just different tax strategies. Or a lot of the time, Michael Kitces at kitces.com, the articles that are out are quite lengthy at times, and that's what they're known for. And some could argue that they're quote unquote dry because there's not all these visuals, and I'm like, I'm just eating it up because it's just such great information and I enjoy it. But I'm also not saying that if there was something that I'm trying to research more, maybe that I'm not as passionate about, but I do want to relay something to clients, or maybe I'm using something with a client, I absolutely would prefer something to be more interactive and engaging from that perspective. I'm not just going to hit you with a bunch of dry information, Allie.
And I appreciate that. I'm also realizing as I ask the question, oh, perhaps not the right audience, given that you can geek out on taxes and I can just give you my things to do my taxes.
Yep, exactly. But overall, I mean, I'm not, if it is even more interactive, I don't think it's a bad thing. And I think you are opening up the market that you're talking to. And if you're finding the different content styles that do work, now maybe that can eventually go downstream into how are we communicating this with actual clients? Again, assuming they need to know that information, and then it's helping them make a decision in their finances, or at least helping them feel more comfortable about their financial situation.
Absolutely. Thank you for that added perspective. So the Standard Insurance Company announced new research showing that female employees are more apt to shoulder the combined financial pressures of their financial household compared to their male counterparts. These pressures include saving for retirement while handling unexpected expenses, which from my perspective reading it was basically life. Standards survey found that women are more likely to prioritize saving for emergencies, eliminating debt, and managing their daily expenses, but doing so made them feel like they were either delaying or minimizing their retirement contributions. Another thing that the press release said, and then I promise I will stop word vomiting at you, was that only 40% of women feel like they're saving enough for retirement compared to 53% of men. So, with all that said, what did you make of all this research?
Well, I've got some thoughts too, but this one I do want to turn the tables and ask you first. So obviously, as a professional woman, you have your own business as well. What are your thoughts? Have you lived some of this, or maybe seen some of your colleagues, your friends seen this? Tell me more about that.
That is totally fair, and I should have seen that coming, but I didn't. So, as much as I had retirement savings starting up my new business and whatnot, I haven't really been focused on them as much as I should, which does on some level bother me, but it also feels like, look, I just got to tackle everyday life, and that's the bucket that I'm in right now. I feel like they generalize, and generalizing isn't necessarily fair, but that women are a little bit more concerned about the whole family picture, and if I do XYZ thing, does that like take away from my kids' future? Does it do this? Does it do that? Versus men just saying, again, generalize, what's the rate of return? And if it's good, then I'm going to go with it. This research does seem like it makes sense to me, but it does also make me a little sad that only 40% of women, according to them, feel like they're saving enough for retirement. That I wish that number were higher. I would also like more than 53% of men to feel the same way.
Right. Right. Yeah. One, thanks for sharing your own experience with that. And right, we can go through different seasons of life. And I think that's one thing that the financial industry doesn't really talk about. It's always, no matter what, you need to be contributing to your retirement accounts every single year. And while that's typically very good advice, each situation is different. Starting a business is much different versus if someone's been in the same job for quite some time and they have a bunch of discretionary income and they're still not saving. Okay, yeah, that's the person's like, okay, yeah, you probably need to start saving a bit more versus, hey, this might be a short-term thing, investing in business that is going to generate income, at least in the present, and eventually allow me to invest more for the future too. So I think sometimes the industry, quite frankly, is so focused on the long term that we don't even address it now. So I'm not even terribly surprised that folks are, both men and women, but women even more so, worried about some of the shorter term things because they're really just not talked about that much in our industry. Again, I think the reason is that's not where the money is. Oh, give me more assets, save more. On the AUM model, of course, that means higher fees. And again, that doesn't mean that AUM is bad, but sometimes our mind just goes and focuses on where are we most compensated versus whenever I make recommendations for emergency funds or paying off debt, I don't necessarily get quote unquote directly compensated if I'm using the AUM model for those types of recommendations, although they're incredibly important. And if you can feel good in the short term, that frees you up to start focusing on the long-term retirement savings aspect.
Yeah. This research also made me think, what is a solid way for people to feel like, yeah, you know what? I have no idea what unexpected whatever is going to happen in my life, but I'm relatively prepared for that. But I'm also saving for my retirement at a rate that makes me feel like I don't have to be worried that I'm going to outlive my money. How is it that somebody balances both of those things?
So each situation, of course, is going to be different. It's going to be simple, but simple doesn't mean easy. But making sure that someone has an adequate emergency fund, I think most people are at least aware of that advice. Sometimes easy, very simple, not always easy to execute. So for folks that, let's say they didn't have a very healthy emergency fund, or maybe they do have some high interest credit card debt, for example, it might even make sense. And this is going to potentially be a really unpopular fancy feeling and or opinion. It could make sense. Let's say someone was contributing 10% to their employer retirement plan and they're getting a match of 5%. Well, maybe it makes sense for the short term to actually reduce their retirement savings to, at this point, at least take advantage of the match is what I would typically recommend, and then repurpose that 5%, whatever the dollar is, to building the emergency fund, to paying off some of the debt, and knowing that, hey, this is a seasonal thing. I'm going to do this for the next year, 2 years, or whatever that looks like. And once I do pay off this, once I do have this healthy emergency fund, then we can start to supercharge our retirement savings. Because what I think that would do is someone, again, each situation is different, but they now have a plan. They have clarity. They have hopefully an objective financial professional, ideally even a certified financial professional, telling them, hey, it's okay if you're not maxing out your 401k this year. That's all right. Here's your specific game plan. And hopefully that short-term plan leads to the long-term confidence too.
Yeah. Very good point. I like that. Do you feel like there's a cutoff point of, and I realize the answer is basically going to be, it depends. So I totally get that. But is there a, like, look, you have hit 55 or so. If you don't have your financial house in order to handle emergencies, you're definitely not going to have your retirement handled. Does such a thing exist, or does it really just depend?
Yeah, again, it's going to depend on how much saving has that 55-year-old, for example, have they already done? Because maybe they're in a new season. Maybe they just went through a divorce, for example. So they had some retirement savings, but let's just keep it real simple. Let's just say they got cut in half recently because of a divorce. And because of that, they had some different fees and whatnot. And maybe their cash position isn't as much. That situation I think, would be a much different one compared to someone's 55, we'll say no major life events like that, and just not great planning, and they don't have much retirement assets, and they don't have much of an emergency fund. Those two are going to be different. The first example, where there was this big life transition, hey, they built it up one time. They clearly had good habits. They have good knowledge on this. Now it's how do we build back up? Versus if we're starting from scratch, it's you're just now considering saving for retirement at 55. That's going to be a lot tougher, real tough.
Yeah. Very fair. And thank you for answering that with honesty instead of just saying, Allie, it depends.
Which is that is one of my pet peeves. I totally acknowledge why financial advisors lead with it depends, but it's when it stops there that grinds my gears. Yes, of course, we all know that it depends, but I'm a big fan of thinking in frameworks where, at least in that case, I could give an example, and now the listeners might not fit either of those examples, and they could have even a more unique situation. And of course, that's okay, but hopefully something in that answer is like, oh, okay, so yes, it depends, but it might depend on these few things. Oh, it's probably much different if my net worth just got cut in half because I had a divorce versus I've never saved a dime ever. I'm probably more in that first camp. So I can feel maybe a little bit better about my situation, knowing that this is just my circumstances, right?
Thank you for that. So our last bit of news today is ending on a fun note. This press release caught my eye based on its headline. The Beatles didn't just change music, they mastered teamwork. Granted, and Brandon, I don't know this about you, but I'm not the biggest Beatles enthusiast. But I know enough to feel like, didn't the band at some point not get along with each other? So I don't know that that is a wholly true example. But if it is, and I'm wrong, there's a book to consider reading relating to the Beatles' career and relationship with leadership. It's called The Fab Four Pillars of Impact. What interested me here was something that AtoZ communications client Drew Boyer of Boyer Financial Group has done, which is connecting music with related and more obscure topics. In his case, it's his Sound Returns platform, where he's connecting music classic legends lessons to financial literacy. But in this Beatles book's case, it's relating leadership, which can be very obscure, to a band that many people know and love, which, as we discussed even earlier in the podcast, people are more apt to remember something that they have a passion for, or at least have some base of knowledge for, and there's more storytelling versus just saying, in leadership, you should try to do XYZ. Those were my fancy feelings and thoughts. How about you?
So I'm in a similar camp to you, Allie. I'm not a huge fan of the Beatles. I'm not anti-Beatles by any stretch, but I guess, yeah, one band that comes to mind would be CCR, Creedence Clearwater Revival. I think they were maybe a little bit after. They also would probably be the opposite of a book for good teamwork, because I'm pretty sure they broke up after only a few years or whatnot, but their music is wonderful. But yeah, so I don't know much about the Beatles' history and whether they broke up or whatnot, but it sounds like, at least from the author of this book, is tying in those stories like you just mentioned that are going to be a bit more memorable, especially for those that know more about the Beatles and follow their work and are big Beatles fans. So I think it's always cool. We're talking about engaging content earlier. I feel like this perfectly ties into that, like you mentioned.
Well, so that's interesting that you brought up CCR. So actually, about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I saw John Fogerty right after he had bought back his masters. So I don't know if he did this everywhere. You can, if you're listening, John Fogerty, you can feel free to tell me. He was celebrating with champagne, having rebought everything. So good to know. And I'm sorry that I didn't share that sooner.
Yeah. Oh, that's super cool. So you saw him perform some of the hits then?
I did, yes. Yes, they were very good. I'll be honest, I didn't know him very well before that. So I had to get told what the famous songs were. But even going through, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that was him. That was cool.
Yeah, it really is pretty impressive. Again, I don't think really either of us were alive when they were still together, to be quite fair. But I feel like so many of their songs are just classics, where I think my wife and I, we do have a vinyl record player, believe it or not. Haven't used it a ton, but we have a couple of their records, and it just seems like the majority of their albums they seem like their greatest hits, but it was just their regular album. And it's just, sometimes you look back, now granted, we're Monday morning quarterbacks here, hindsight's 2020, but man, if this is what they could produce in such a short period of time,
right?
Man, what if they could have done it for a decade, 2 decades, or however long? That's all what if, but so cool that you got to see John Fogerty. Definitely jealous. And I'm going to have to look to see if he's coming anywhere near me, because that'd be a lot of fun.
You should. And it's interesting that you say that you have a vinyl record player. So actually, I just bought myself one not that long after Christmas, after I bought someone else one. And I was like, actually, I want one of those. So how long have you guys had yours?
Oh, we've had ours, honestly, since before we moved to California. So it's like 5 or 6 years now, probably.
Oh, so you were actually cool instead of the people who found it like way after the fact.
I don't know if actually cool is the right way, but yeah, we've had it for a little bit of time, and even a lot of modern artists. We also, now we're talking about music here. We like Post Malone pretty well, but we have, I think we need to get one more now, but we have all of his vinyls, and obviously his music has come out in the last 10 years, more or less. And I think some artists, it's almost the collection is what people are doing with the newer artists. Of course, yes, we're streaming it on Apple Music, Spotify, but sometimes it's cool to just have the record. You have company over, put the record on, and then after a couple times you're like, okay, I'm kind of tired of flipping this every 30 minutes or however long it lasts on one side. I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna connect into the Sonos and play Apple Music or Spotify, so I don't have to get up anymore. But it's record players are pretty neat.
They are. Dinner time has become which record are we putting on? And we're going to listen throughout dinner. But
that's super cool,
because dinner probably takes about a half hour. It tends to make it through the end, and then maybe there's some silence afterwards.
Nice. But no, that's really cool though. I feel like, your kids are going to have those memories of, again, even though it's still old technology now, we put a record on at dinner. I really do think it's more about the experience of that. And it's cool that you're directly tying that to dinner time. So that's awesome.
Thank you. Well, so thank you. Neither one of us expected to go through our music genre or how we listen to things, but as always, you follow my lead, whether you like to or not. So thank you for putting up with me, and thanks for all of your great insights that were quite honest and helpful.
Yeah, awesome. This was another fun episode. That's what makes these so enjoyable, though. We know what we're going to talk about from a news perspective, but sometimes one of us will say something that we go on what I think at least are fun tangents. And for folks that have listened to this point, they must think that they're at least halfway decent if they're still listening. So always fun. Appreciate you, Allie.
Yeah, thank you.